The following is a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. For more information, please visit our website at dallasgenealogy.org.
We all are, after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, with it being 9:30, I would like to welcome everyone. This is Barry Kaplan Schweitzer, and I'm the president of this incredible organization with much pride. Welcome to the Dallas Genealogical Society's incredible, unexpected, snowed-in Zoom, but because we learned we have a meteorologist on staff, we knew and were able to pivot. So thankfully, having our own Bernard on this class made it even extra special. But I really have to welcome everyone, give a huge shout out to our IT team who makes this possible every time. The fact that we have such beloved and passionate genealogical volunteers that sets Dallas apart and makes it so special really is just, we're so proud. And of course, this all ties up to our spring seminar, which is coming up, and we welcome and hope all of you will take a part. And looking forward to hearing what Barbara and Bernard have to share today that ties back to that upcoming event. With that, I would love to introduce our Vice President, Nancy Pardo, who is not only an incredible genealogist in her own right, but is also a fantastic and healing human being who has both wings back. So Nancy, please take it away, and thank you all again for making this event happen.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, I have the pleasure of introducing our two speakers who are probably well known to most of you. They are illustrious members of our society. And Barbara Coakley and Bernard Meisner will be co-hosting today's program, co-presenting. As Barry mentioned, this is a preface to our spring seminar with Mike Galakapo, who will be talking to us about German genealogical research. Many of you may have heard him before. But today, Barbara will kick us off. A little bit about Barbara, if you don't know her well, her interest in family history began about 30 years ago. She was given an envelope of family papers. Does that sound familiar? But her journey has taken her to homelands across the U.S. and Europe. She's president of the Genealogy Friends of the Plano Libraries, and she also volunteers for the Texas State Genealogical Society, as well as for DGS. She's an alumnus of multiple programs, including ProGen, Trigger, GRIP, and others. She has taught genealogical continuing education classes at Collin County College from 2008 to 2021. And she also does presentations for libraries, genealogical societies, and throughout the US and the UK. She'll be speaking to us first. It will be the first session. The second session will be led by our own Bernard Meisner. And Bernard is also a genealogist and lecturer. He's based in the DFW area. He began researching his family about 35 years ago, and he enjoys sharing lessons, as he says, from those ancestor pursuits. He said both from the successes and the mistakes. He said he only knew one of his grandparents, his maternal grandfather, but since that time he has successfully identified multiple generations back, including his Meisner eighth great-grandparents. So he is a past president of the Mid-Cities Genealogical Society. He's a co-leader in the DGS German SIG, and he's a member of the National Germanic, Texas State, and National Genealogical Societies. So I don't want to take any more time away from our program. Barbara, if you'd like to kick us off, welcome everyone to the seminar, and we hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me this morning, and I hope everybody's staying nice and warm. It is critical to know your ancestors' hometown to research German records because there are no central archives. Records are organized by town or parish or maybe a regional archives, but the hometown is a critical piece of information. Other things, including the birth, marriage, and/or death dates, religion, immigration date, and any other family members, can also help you locate the correct person. All of this starts with records in the United States and requires thorough research. Before we look at examples of records that provide clues to the hometown of some of my ancestors, let's go back to basics. Research projects start with a research question. For this project, it would be to find the hometown in Germany for a specific ancestor. What's the next step? Gather everything you already know about that person and review each record carefully. Read it, analyze the information, and record it in your research plan. Next, think about what records might contain the information to answer your question. And we're going to talk about a number of those today. Once you figure out what records you want, you have to find out if they still exist for the location and the time period where your ancestor lived. And if they do, where are they? And please don't forget about records that aren't available online. Believe it or not everything is digitized and available online. Sometimes you have to contact courthouses, hire researchers, or make a visit somewhere to get that record that you need. So once your plan is done, then it's time to actually search. Make sure that you follow your plan. Don't go down rabbit holes. If you find something else that's interesting, make a note of it, keep it, and work on it later. As you go through and look at different sources, you need to make sure that you record a source citation for each one on your research log, even if you don't find anything. But if you're lucky and you do, you want to download a copy of it, abstract or transcribe the information into your research log, analyze that information, and don't forget to compare it to what you already know. That's one way to make sure that you've got the right person and not somebody with the same name. You don't really want to spend time researching somebody else's family. One of the things you need to look for is conflicts. Are there two records that you think are your ancestor that have different birth dates or different immigration dates? You need to work to resolve those conflicts. And don't forget to write up a summary at the end. This is a great way to identify holes in your research and to make sure that you're sharing that research with family members. Now, let's talk about some records that might contain that hometown information. The first couple that I would like to introduce you to are some of my paternal second great-grandparents. And you'll see that in my family, that's the generation that immigrated to the United States. This is Christian Schomeyer and Rosina Schroeder. Now, one of the best places to find out if your ancestors are German or not is where we start with a lot of our research, and that's to look at the census records. So I found census records for Christian and Rose or Rosina starting in 1870. And for Christian, it said that he came from Germany. He was 30 years old and he was a shoemaker. For Rosina, it said she was 23 and there was a W in the birthplace. And then there was some other writing there, but it was all scratched out and I couldn't really read it. By 1880, Christian was listed as Christ and Rosina had switched to Rosa. They were both from Württemberg, according to the censuses. In 1900, he shows up as George Schomeyer, and she shows up as Carrie R., both from Germany. And in 1910, we're back to Christian and Rose, and again, it said Germany. Now, you might get lucky, and there may be a town name on a census. So far, I haven't found any, but there are other people that have. So don't forget to look at your census records. Now, the 1910 census also asks some questions about immigration and naturalization. So it said that both Christian and Rosina immigrated in 1868 and that Christian had been naturalized. Now, If you look at the census records, you'll see there's different names. It's not uncommon for Germans to have had multiple first names. And it turns out that Christian's name was actually George Christian Schomeyer or Georg Christian. Most of the time he went by Christian, but I needed to make a note and remember that I also needed to look under George. The other thing was that I found multiple spellings of Schomeyer. Sometimes there's a C in front of the H, sometimes there isn't. Spelling wasn't standardized in Germany until the late 19th century, so it's not uncommon to find multiple spellings in the records. So I keep a list of all the different spellings that I find, what record it was, and what time period. Because sometimes you can see how the name actually evolves over time. Okay, so I had a clue. It looked like they were both from Germany, potentially from Württemberg. Now, where do I go next? Well, based off that 1910 census, I'm looking for an immigration, potentially in 1868. One of the places that you can go to look for immigration of Germans is the Germans to America published volumes. These include ships where the majority of the passengers were German. So your ancestor might have immigrated, but not on a ship that had a large percentage of Germans, so they may or may not be in here. But it's pretty easy to check. There's an index on Family Search and one on the National Archives website. I checked the index, and sure enough, there were entries for Christian and Rosina. So I went to the actual books, and this is a copy of what the entry in the book looked like. It said that they came in and they arrived the 18th of September, 1868 from Bremen on the ship Schmid. And that he was a farmer. It said they were from Württemberg and they were going to Maine. Well, I found them in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and eventually in Kansas City, both on the Kansas and the Missouri side, but I have never found any evidence of them actually going to Maine. We want to look at the original records. So if you find your ancestor in some place like Germans to America or some other index, make sure you go look for that passenger list. The passenger list for this couple was available on Ancestry, and it confirmed that all the information had been extracted correctly. And it confirmed the arrival date and the ship, but there wasn't any new information there. Just because some of my ancestors didn't have their hometown on their passenger list doesn't mean you shouldn't look for it. And some of them that came over much later from other places, the more recent the immigration, the more information that is on the passenger list. Now, it also said that Christian had been naturalized, and I looked for naturalization records in Kansas, in the county where Kansas City is, and sure enough, I found his naturalization record. Again, it only said Germany, but go ahead and check it because it might give you more information. Another place that I looked for their potential hometown information was on their death certificates. This is George Christian Schomeyer, and you can see again, it says George C. He was a retired shoemaker. His wife was Rosina, so I think I've got the right death certificate here. They had a son named John, and the informant on this is John. The family is all buried at Quindaro Cemetery in Kansas City, Kansas. So it didn't give me any new information, except it gave me his date of birth, March 18th, 1842. When I looked at Rosina's death certificate, it was pretty much the same story. The informant here was their daughter Anna, and it gave me a birth date for Rosina, November 2nd, 1847. But it just said Germany again, and it looks like neither one of the children knew the names of their grandparents or where their parents actually were born. However, if you can get a hold of family stories and documents, they can be great resources if you're lucky enough to have them. So make sure you ask your relatives if they have anything that might help. I'll show you a couple of instances today where I asked that question, and lo and behold, they produced some documents that were critical to my research. So I can thank my paternal grandmother for information on her mother-in-law's family. Now, I'm not sure who wrote this, but Grandma Helen gave it to my Aunt Charlene. And when I started asking questions about family history, Aunt Charlene passed it on. This Rose Schomeyer was my great grandmother, and this document named her parents, identified their birth dates, and birthplaces. Here's a blow up of the section for her father, George Christian Schomeyer, born March 18th, 1842, in Kirchheim, Württemberg, Germany, on the river Neckar. They came to America on September 18th, 1868. Well, the birth date matched what was on his death certificate, and the immigration date matched what was on the ship's passenger list. So it looked like this information might be correct. Rosina Schomeyer, maiden name was Rosina Schroeder, born November 2nd, 1847, in Mundelsheim, Germany. So now I had two town names. My next step was to go to Myers Gazetteer website, and I failed to put this in your handout. So if you want to take a screenshot of it, please go ahead. This is a website that took the material from Myers Gazetteer, which were actually published volumes, and it's got information on all the towns that were in Germany at the time. So I put in Kirchheim and did my search. Well, guess what? There are 13 towns in Germany that are all called Kirchheim, and 3 of them are in Württemberg. It wasn't unusual for names to be reused. But when I got to number 13, this one said Kirchheim am Neckar, which meant it was on the Neckar River. So that clue in that document saved me a whole lot of time. If you click on the link, it actually brings up a page that has lots of information about that town. You can see the original entry from the published volume. There's a map that shows where the town is. And then there's information about the different jurisdictions. And if you scroll down where it says detail, it tells you what each of those levels mean. Also, if you click on the ecclesiastical tab, it will tell you where the nearest churches are. Now, I suspected that the Schomeyers were Protestants. And the reason is because there was a family story that said that when Rose Schomeyer married John Theodore Coakley, who was an Irish Catholic, her father disowned her. So I was thinking that I would be looking in the Protestant church. And there is a parish in Kirchheim itself. So that gave me a place to start looking for the German church records. Now, I had connected with another Schomeyer researcher. She was descended from a different child of Christian and Rosina than I am, but she was willing to share some of the things she had. She gave me this images of these documents, and there were 6 or 7 pages. They were all written in German, and the first page said that it was his naturalization papers. But that didn't make sense to me because his naturalization papers probably wouldn't have been written in German. So I used Transcribus, one of the AI sites, to transcribe the information. And I took that and went to the Deep L translator. And what I found out was this was actually a letter from an attorney and a copy of a will. Christian's uncle, Jakob Friedrich Schomeyer, was a farmer. And when he died, he left Christian an inheritance. So now I had the name of a relative. Oh, and by the way, he was from Kirchheim also. So that confirmed the name of the town. So what did I know? Well, George Christian Schomeyer was born on 18 March 1842, probably in Kirchheim, Württemberg, on the Neckar River. He had an uncle, Jakob Friedrich Schomeyer. I had Rosina's birth date and a town name for her, and I knew that the couple had arrived in New York in 1868 from Bremen. So I was ready to go start looking for records in Germany for this couple. As a matter of fact, I not only found them, but went back multiple generations into the 1600s in records in both Mundelsheim and Kirchheim. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take a trip to Germany, connect with a cousin from the Schomeyer line and the archivist in Mundelsheim for the Schroeder line, and spent 2 days going through those towns and doing research. I was actually able to walk through the towns where both of them were born and raised and where their ancestors lived for a number of generations. It was a great experience. This second great grandfather's name is Paul C. Bray, and he's on my mom's side of the family. He lived in Waterloo, Monroe County, Illinois, where she was born and raised. Family members had been there since the 1830s. Now, Paul he was a very prominent member of the community. He was actually kept a store in Burkesville, which is a little bitty town about 3 miles from Waterloo. Then he moved into Waterloo and became the county clerk, eventually the county judge. And he was also a notary. I had lots of records for him. The census records just said Germany and Württemberg for his birthplace. I had land records, tax records, court records, all kinds of things, but nothing gave me any information about his parents, his siblings, or his hometown until I found a county history. Most counties have a history that was published in the late 1800s, some of them early 1900s, and there can be called mug books, and you can see here why. Subscribers could pay to have their biographies, and if they paid enough money, they even got a picture put into the county history. Fortunately for me, Paul did both. And here's a little bit of what it said. The subject of the following sketch is of German nativity. He was born in the vicinity of Ulm, September 10th, 1834. His father, Ernst Bray, was a native of the same place. He came of a family possessed of ample means, and being of scholastic turn of mind, was educated in the University of Tübingen, became a teacher, studied theology, and subsequently adopted the profession of teacher of languages. In 1849, he emigrated to America, settled in New York, and a year later came west to St. Louis. And Monroe County in Waterloo is right across the river from St. Louis. So that gave me information I didn't have: the name of his father, his birth date, and the year that they immigrated. Next, I found the ship's passenger list that listed Paul, his parents, and his siblings. They sailed on the ship Cotton Planter from Antwerp, Belgium, and arrived in New York in August of 1849. Now, in order to find that hometown, I was going to have to research other members of Paul's family because I hadn't found it in any of the records for him. This is what the passenger list looked like, so I put it in a table so we could read it. Ernst Bray was the head of household. His wife was Marie, and there were a whole bunch of kids. Eleanor, Paul, Matilda, Julius, Herman, Christine, Delia, Eugene, and Christoph. Well, now I had members of Paul's family and their ages. Now, from doing research, I knew that there was a Württemberg Emigration Index. The index is available on Ancestry, and the original documents are available through Family Search. When I found the index entry for them, it gave me Ernst's birth date, his middle initial, and his actual birth town, Laufen. Now, I looked up Ulm, and it was a very large city in Württemberg. But Laufen was a small town, and that gave me a place to start. I kept going, though, so now I had the names of all of Paul's siblings, and one by one, I researched them as well. You never know when a sibling, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, or a child's record might have the information that you need. Well, Paul had a brother named Julius Caesar Bray, and he served in the Civil War. He was injured at the Battle of Shiloh and died 5 years later of complications after yet another surgery related to his injury. Julius had filed for a pension himself, and in his pension file, it said that he was unable to work because of his injury, and he was destitute and barely able to support himself. Unfortunately, he never knew that the pension was awarded because it was awarded by the Pension Bureau about 3 days before he actually passed away. It's kind of a sad story. But Ernst, his father, a few years later, filed a dependent parent pension application. Now it was denied, and my guess is that Julius's letters saying that he was destitute were probably part of the reason, because what Ernst was claiming was that he was dependent on Julius for financial support. Now I have figured out that pensions that were denied can have lots more information than pensions that are actually awarded. And that was the case here. In order to file this application, Ernst had to prove that he was Julius's father. And luckily for me, included in the file were transcriptions and translations of some German church records. The first one says that Ernst Bray, formerly the pastor in Donstatten, was united in matrimony with Maria Regina Kruner, daughter of evangelical pastor Kruner, on October 12, 1830, in Magdalsheim. And it even gave me the district where it was. The other record was Julius's baptism record. It said, Julius Caesar, parents Ernst Bray, pastor in Donstatten, and his wife Maria Regina, born Kruner, and it gave Julius's date of birth there. Well, now I had 3 towns, Laufen, Magdalsheim, and Donstatten. And I knew a whole lot more about the family than I did. These towns were actually the right ones, and the church records were available through Family Search. At the time, I had to go to Salt Lake City to look at them, but now you can go to, for the evangelical records, most of them are restricted to being in a affiliate library, which the Dallas Public Library is, or a family history center. Now, remember, I said there were interesting name issues with some of the Germans. John Henry Struck was my second great grandfather, one of my dad's great grandfathers. Now, it turns out, after I did a bunch of research, that I found out that there were actually 3 sons in this family, all named variations in German of John Henry. One of them stayed in Germany and did not immigrate that I've been able to find. but the other two, along with their brother Bernard, came to St. Louis. Fortunately for me, my ancestor went through life by John. His younger brother went through life by Henry, and then there was Bernard, who had a different name. So I've been able to sort out the records for most of them. However, their naturalization records, I'm not sure I've got the right one for the right person, because they were both naturalized in St. Louis, and they both say Johann Heinrich Struck. All three brothers were married in St. Louis. They moved their families then to Coakley, Illinois, in Henderson County. Bernard and his wife died there. Henry moved his family across the Mississippi River to Burlington, Iowa, and John moved his family to Maryville, Missouri, which is where I found the only record that I had come up with that gave me the name of the hometown, his obituary. He died in 1896 at his home, and it said that he was born January 22nd, 1814, at Westkirchen, Warendorf, Germany, where he grew to manhood, and that he came to this country in 1846, and he married Louisa Griffey the same year. So I went to the St. Louis marriage records, and the civil record really didn't tell me anything other than the name of the bride and groom and their ages, but it did tell me the name of the Catholic priest that married them. I was able to go to the city directories to find out which parish in St. Louis he was working at, and those records are available through Family Search, and I found the church record. And it says that John Henry Struck was the son of Ferdinand and Anna Maria Klein Rene, and he was 33 years old. His bride was Louisa, the daughter of Ferdinand Griffey, and Erica Reutemann. She was 22 years old. And if you look here, you can see that John Henry signed his name, and so did his brother Bernard. The death was a little bit different between the two. I mean, his birth was a little different between the two records. Based off of his age when he was married, he was probably born in 1815 or 1816. His obituary said 1814. But at least I had a date range that was fairly small. I had the name of a town, and I had the name of his brothers. So I was able to find the Catholic Church records, and every one of the children in this family was named after their baptismal sponsor, boys and girls alike. And the three boys that were named John Henry all had different sponsors, all with the name John Henry with different last names. It's not also uncommon if a child dies that another child born later might be named the same thing after them. So you do really have to be careful. Make sure you've got the right person. This distinguished looking gentleman is Christian Hofmeister. Christian was a prominent member of society in Carondelet, which was a separate city south of St. Louis, and then it was actually annexed by the city of St. Louis. And it's a neighborhood that was founded originally by the French, and then a lot of Germans moved into that area. Christian is a maternal second great grandfather. When I looked at his census records, it told me that he was from Germany or from Hanover. His naturalization record was renouncing his allegiance to the ruler of Hanover. Now, Christian was a very prominent citizen. He owned the livery stable. He owned a farm out in St. Louis County where they raised the horses for the livery stable. He ran the omnibus from Carondelet to downtown St. Louis. And shortly after the Civil War, he started one of the first funeral homes in St. Louis, Hofmeister Mortuaries. Now, they are still in existence today, but they were sold out of the family in the 1970s. So the family ran them for over 100 years before they were sold. Christian also served as a city councilman for Carondelet before it was annexed by St. Louis. Because I knew he was naturalized, I decided to look for a passport application because I had found some for some of my other German relatives. Now, he applied for this in 1874 because he and his family, consisting of his wife and two of his children, were taking a trip back to his hometown in Germany. It said that he was born in Hanover on the 4th day of January, 1824. Oftentimes, when Germans went home again, they took passports even though they were not required by law this early. And you can find the passport applications on Ancestry. So it's definitely worth looking to see. I looked at the German church records, and the first record that I found, the oldest dated record for Christian, was on the 9th of January, 1844. He was the witness at a wedding of Friedrich Lessmann and his bride. And it said that Friedrich was from Ostluther, and it gave the name of the district in Hanover. I kept looking through those church records and I found a marriage for Christian Hofmeister from Ostluther in Hanover and Margaretha Hemm. One of the witnesses was Heinrich Daga. One of the things about this family was the religion confused me for a while. Christian and Margaretha were married in an evangelical Lutheran church. However, all of their children were baptized Catholic, and they were both buried out of their burials were in the Catholic Church as well, even Christians. So as I researched the other family members that I eventually found, it looks to me like the Hofmeisters were Protestant and the Hemms were Catholic. Unfortunately, the church records for the area of Hanover, where they're from, are not available, or at least I haven't found them online yet. Now, newspapers are another source that you should definitely check into. Here's the obituary from the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. The funeral of Christian Hofmeister will take place this afternoon from the family residence, 7818 South Broadway, Carondelet. The deceased was an old and prominent citizen of Carondelet. However, there were actually two newspapers at the time in St. Louis that were published in the German language. If your immigrant ancestor lives somewhere where there is a newspaper published in their native language, make sure you look at that one as well, because look at the difference in the obituaries. The one on the right is from one of the German papers, and it includes lots of information. It starts with our old and well-known citizen died yesterday evening at 9 o'clock after suffering from ailments for a long time at the age of 60. The deceased was born in Ostluther in the former Kingdom of Hanover in 1844. Well, I think he was actually born in 1824 because by 1844 he was in St. Louis. But it gave me another confirmation of the same town name. Court records are another place to look. And fortunately for me, the St. Louis Genealogical Society had gone through the probate records and published a abstract of the information for each file in a series of volumes. Now, it included who was the executor or administrator, Well, I went through and started looking for Christian Hofmeister, and I found over 20 estates where he had been named as the administrator or executor. But I knew I needed to look at the original files because I didn't recognize any of the names. Well, I started and I would go from one to the next and didn't recognize anything, found no relation to the family that I knew of until I got to, it was probably about number 19 out of the 20. But I'm really glad that I kept going because this was the file for a man named Anton Wilkie. It turns out that Anton was Christian's stepfather. And in his probate packet was a copy of his will. It told me that his wife's name was Wilhelmina Wilkie, her maiden name was Brunke, and that she had formerly been married to Heinrich Daga and afterwards Karl Hofmeister, both of whom were deceased. So I kept reading. Excuse me a minute. I kept reading. Sorry. And it turns out that he not only named his wife, but all of her children. Anton and Wilhelmina didn't have any kids, but she did from both of her first two marriages. The first one was Heinrich Daga, the son of Heinrich Daga. Remember the name at that witness at Christian and Margaretha's wedding? Well, it turns out it was his stepbrother. It also named the children that she had with Karl Hofmeister, Christian, Wilhelm, and Johanna. Now, I had found other records where Christian and a man named William Hofmeister were doing business. There were court records, land records, and even on the census records, they were together. But I assumed, or my hypothesis was, that they were brothers, but I had found no proof until I found this document. So now I had the names of the family, some birth dates for Christian, and information about the town. So I'm ready to start trying to find those records. Now, Christian's wife, Margaretha, according to her death record, it said that she was born in Germany. The census has said Bavaria or Germany. Fortunately, there were not many people by the name of Hem or Ham, it was probably pronounced in German, in the St. Louis. When I went to the probate records and did a search on that last name, I came up with one, Jacob. And he died intestate without a will. So the first thing that the administrator appointed by the court needed to do was list all of the legal heirs. His wife was Elizabeth, and he had a son, John, and a daughter, Margaret, the wife of Christian Hofmeister. So I knew that I had the right Hem family. And here is Elizabeth's signature. Now, one place that I think that you should look, but you need to be careful, is online family trees. Check to see if somebody else has already found that hometown. But treat it as a clue, not a fact, unless there are sources attached to the tree to back it up. And even then, I would still confirm it. Now, I found a tree out there for Jacob Hem, born 22 May 1791 in Ramstein in Kaiserlautern in Rhineland Falls, Germany. There are websites, and there's two of them in your handout, that show distribution of surnames. So I put in the surname on one of the websites, and almost all of the hits came up in that Kaiserlautern district. So I was thinking that I probably was narrowing down the place. On my second trip to Germany, I had found this just before we left for my second trip to Germany. One of the stops that we made on that trip was at the Institute for Palatinate History and Ethnology in Kaiserslautern. And the German name of the institute is on there. I'm not even going to try and pronounce all that. So we attended a lecture there. And then after the lecture, we had time to go through some of their reference materials and could ask questions. So I asked them about the family. And the man that ran the institute that had done the lecture for us said, "Oh, yeah, they're definitely from this area." So on my next trip to Salt Lake City, I went to Reimstein and looked, and I found the records for Jacob. His wife's maiden name turned out to be Elizabeth Bott. She had been married once before to a man named Bosung and had children by both of them. And I was able to find all of the kids, their baptism, and unfortunately, all of the children that she had, except for John and Margaretha, passed away, most of them at very young ages. I haven't been able to actually visit Ramstein yet because I haven't been back to Germany yet, but I've got the church records there. My mother's other set of maternal great-grandparents were Gottlieb Siebold and Maria Magdalena Schneider. I recently got this picture of Maria Magdalena from a collection at Southern Illinois University. They have papers from the Siebold family there, and they were kind enough to go through some of the pictures and scan them and send them to me. Now, this couple eventually ended up, their son eventually ended up in Waterloo, where my mom grew up. She actually grew up living in his house. And I've spent a lot of time in Waterloo. Now, Mom has a cousin there. His name was George. And George was the youngest son, the only remaining living son. And his father was the oldest child of George Washington and Margaretha Hofmeister. So he had a lot of family papers. And I hadn't really thought about it. I'd visited him a couple times, but I never asked him, "George, do you have anything that might help me? Any family documents or anything?" His wife Noreen turned to him and said, "George, give Barb that box in the basement." Well, it was full of amazing family documents. And one of them was the original marriage certificate from the Protestant church where Gottlieb Siebold from Wagenstadt, Baden, had married Maria Magdalena Schneider from Brogingen, Baden, the 5th of August, 1851. And once I had this, and I looked a little bit later, the actual church, the images of the church books are now available online as well. And you can see that the entry pretty much matches the original certificate there. So I had their hometowns. I was able to connect with other Siebold and Schneider researchers in St. Louis and Indiana. And 13 of us all made a trip to Germany and visited not only Wagenstadt and Brogingen, but the Siebold's had originally started in Freiamt and Ottoschwanden. We went there. We had records that showed that the Schneiders had come from Switzerland. So we went over and spent a couple of days in Switzerland after a week in Germany. And we were able to connect with Siebold cousins that still live in Brogingen today. Now, there's one other published resource that if you're lucky enough to have somebody in it, can give you a lot of information. It's a project called German Immigrants in American Church Records, or GIACR. This is a project that's being done under the direction of Dr. Roger Meinert, and they are going around and collecting information from German church records and compiling it into published volumes. And you can see the number of the volume on the map. This is from their website that shows which volume has which states. And also on the website are lists so that it shows you, for example, in Nebraska is volume 6, which churches do they have information on. Now, the Dallas Public Library has a number of these published volumes, and what the entries give you is the person's name, their birthplace, the location where the church was, which church it was. So it gives you some information. Then you can go get a hold of the original church records and start your research from there. But it's a great resource, and it's an ongoing project. So they're still working on collecting church records. So keep an eye on it. If your state hasn't been done yet, just check back on the website periodically because they're still collecting things and compiling them. Well, today we've talked about following a reputable research process and carefully analyzing all of the documents that you find and research the entire family. Some of the things that we looked at were online family trees. Again, please treat these as clues. Family papers. Ask anybody that's related to the family, do you know any family stories? Do you have any documents? They just might have them and just might share them with you. Census records is a good place to start to find out if your ancestors are German. Biographies in things like county histories or other published biographies of people. For Gottlieb, I actually found a biography of him in a publication for millers. He owned grist mills in a number of different places. And in a publication that was specifically targeted to millers, there was a whole biography of him. Pension files, obituaries, and all newspaper articles. So just search the newspapers for your ancestor to see what you can find. Church records are a gold mine. Oftentimes, both Protestant and Catholic records are going to give you the name of the hometown. Check immigration and naturalization records. Don't forget about those passport applications. Court records for guardianships, probate, even just court cases. You never know what you're going to find. We talked about a couple of different published records and those surname distribution maps. One of the things that I used them for on some of the surnames was trying all the different spellings that I had found to see which ones were actually German surnames. Because sometimes as names evolved here in the States, the spellings changed enough that they may not be in the German records under those spellings. So I hope that I've given you some ideas on where to look so you can start your research on your German ancestors. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. There's a couple that are in the chat. We'll start with those if that's okay.
Sure.
The first one is in 1942, without knowing the place of an attempted border crossing, where would one look for court proceedings for a person, specifically a Jewish person, trying to escape East Germany while it was under Russian control?
Oh boy, that is completely outside of my area of expertise.
I would also mention potentially that there's just been some presentations on this topic, but I don't know if you have visited CompGen is it compgen.org or compgen. It's a German website, compgen.de.
Mhm.
That one, and search for the town there. They might have some information. I know that the National Archives has the records for all the consulates in Germany and any communication that was going between consulates. And I also know that Berlin has a lot of records as well. And there's a archives in Berlin that you can check. You have to translate everything in English, but anyway, Bernard may have some other suggestions as well.
Right. And the other thing is, that sounds like a great question to ask Michael at the seminar in March.
Okay. Go ahead. Okay. The next question was lost it here. There you go. At what point would passports have been required for Germans leaving Germany? When would they have needed permission to immigrate? And where would immigration records be kept and found online? Immigration, leaving Germany.
I know that there are immigration indexes for Baden and for Württemberg. And remember, Germany wasn't Germany until 1871. So the immigration requirements would be different for each state. In those that I know in Baden and Württemberg, they were supposed to get permission to leave. Some of my ancestors did, and some didn't. I have found in German newspapers notices that, like Maria Magdalena Schneider's father brought the rest of the family over shortly after she and Gottlieb came. And I found the German newspaper talking about the fact that he was leaving to notify creditors. The notices were similar to probate notices that we have today, where if an estate's going to be settled, if anybody's got a claim against it, they should come forward. There are passenger lists for some of the ports. And don't forget that some of the Germans went to places like Antwerp or Le Havre, so they didn't all leave from Germany. And some of the passenger lists still exist, some of them were destroyed, but a lot of them are available online. I would check like Ancestry, MyHeritage, and Family Search for those things.
I think that's all the questions that I see in chat. We want to open it up to others. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, anybody should feel free to unmute and chat away with us.
Can you spell the name of that website that you were giving out in regards to the border crossing question? The site.de. I didn't get the spelling on it.
It's compgen, COMPGEN.DE. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, in fact, Nancy Myers posted it in the chat too, so you can just click on it there.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. I did find it right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
How do you spell Le Havre? You said some went to boat, some went to Antwerp or Le Havre. How do you?
Yes, it's LE and then a separate word, HAVRE.
Thanks.
This is the show. It's meeting.
Yeah.
You're doing it now?
No, it's seminar.
Yeah, and Le Havre was in France too.
And Antwerp is in Belgium, but there were some that went those different places, as well as leaving from like Bremen and Hamburg.
And it's also worth noting too that many people came to the United States via Canada. So they would actually arrive in a Canadian port and then travel by train or something and come into the United States. So they don't necessarily arrive directly in the US.
Where they'd leave Amsterdam, go to England, go across to Liverpool and leave from there.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's they could have also come on a ship from the UK.
Yeah.
And I'll be mentioning in our next presentation, you really got to do your homework on the German side as well.
There was a note in the chat about a question to the audience. Anyone researching Bonesteel, various spellings, Bonesteel, Teel. Just looking for somebody with a common surname, I think.
A question. My mother's maiden name was Dryman, Dryman, and my probable ancestor came over in 1773 to Philadelphia, and he came in on a boat from Rotterdam. I'm not sure where Rotterdam is, but with that, I mean, I'm assuming it's German, but I haven't traced it back that far.
Rotterdam is in the Netherlands.
Oh, okay.
And I would go to one of the surname distribution maps and put in the surname and see if it pops up.
Okay.
And
I
also,
noticed that the date on it on the distribution map begins in 1890. I mean, he left in 1773. So would it?
when he landed in Philadelphia, that was the British colonies at the time. Therefore, all the Germans were foreigners and they had to swear allegiance to the king. So when the ship landed, they marched everybody over 16 to the courthouse. They had to swear their allegiance to the king, and a lot of those records are available online.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The question is, what are those allegiance records called?
That's why there's a family search wiki.
And Bernard, are you going to talk about the wiki in your presentation?
I'll mention just a little in passing with that.
Okay.
As well as Myers-Gaz and Comchen and a few other things. So my presentation will say, okay, you've figured out they came from Germany, and now you got to do the work on the German side. But Barbara emphasized that it's most important that you got to do your work on this side of the ocean first, because all the records in Germany nearly are at the various location. And there's no county courthouse necessarily. There's certainly not National Archives with genealogical records. So you have to know that specific location. So you have to learn about the place and the time that you're interested in. And that'll be the theme of my presentation coming up in about half an hour.
And just in case you're not familiar with the Family Search Wiki, I just posted a link to that as well. It's a wonderful resource. It literally on that page, you'll see it's a map. You can click on the region of the world you're interested in, drill down to the specific location that you're interested in researching, and it will give you very specific information about information that is known and of interest to genealogists. So it's a really invaluable tool when you're starting to research an area to see what's available and where to find it.
I want to thank Nancy Meyer for she added a link to the Ancestry's names who took the oath of allegiance in the state of Pennsylvania, 1727 to 1775. So that might be helpful.
I agree with Martha. It's very good, and it's only half over too. So we got another half to look forward to. So it sounds like we're kind of running out of questions. So we'll go ahead and take our scheduled breakdown. Be back here at 11. But feel free during that time, if you want to come in here and just chat, ask questions, got something you want to share with the rest of us, feel free. But Vernon's presentation will pick up at 11 o'clock. With that, I'll stop the recording. This has been a production of the Dallas Genealogical Society. If you're already a member, thank you. Your fees have been supporting these and other society activities. If you're not yet a member, please consider joining now. Go to dallasgenealogy.org and click on the membership tab.